Hi, all. Maybe I'll turn this. Okay. Sorry, it's been a while since I've posted. I haven't been feeling well because of this nerve damage to my face and the weather. So I wanted to quickly go through a document I found. I've been reading a lot of documents lately. I just kind of wanted to explain some of the things that we see in this world. And I don't know, I've been wrong for many years that I've been saying that they, the elites want a world government, but the truth is they already have one. So we're going to look at this Operations Research Technical Manual, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars from 1954. And you'll see here, we'll put it back up here on the first page. It's only 45 pages long. Thought about reading it out loud to you guys, but then I was like, what if I get tired? Anyways, so this document is supposedly adopted by the international elites at the first Bilderberg meeting in 1954. So apparently, what happened with this was that this document had been left on a printer that was bought by someone else. And I don't know if you realize that anytime you scan something into like an IBM printer, it actually keeps a copy of whatever was printed. So that this was actually found by a guy who worked for Boeing who had bought a surplus copier. All right, so down here I had I highlighted this where it says the consensus opinion was to distribute this to as many people as who wanted it, to the end that they would not only understand that war had been declared against him, and that it would be properly identifying who the true enemy of humanity is. Okay, this is their preface. Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, an introduction programming manual, was uncovered quite by accident on July 7th, 1986, when an employee of Boeing Aircraft Company purchased a surplus IBM copier for scrap parts at a sale and discovered inside details of a plan hatched in the embryonic days of the Cold War, which called for control of the masses through manipulation of industry, people's pastimes, education, and political leanings. It called for a quiet revolution, putting brother against brother and diverting the public's attention from what is really going on. So here's this big table of contents where you see all the security, historical introduction. One of the most interesting things as I was reading through this is energy. So how they have pinned economics to energy. And we'll go through it as we go down through here. But they do definitely have a world government. You just are only starting to see it right now. So here's the first part, security. It is patently impossible to discuss social engineering or the automation of a society, i.e., the engineering of social automation systems, silent weapons on a national or worldwide scale, without implying extensive objectives of social control and destruction of human life, i.e., slavery and genocide. So this silent weapon technology evolved from operations research in military management in England during World War II. So they've been studying us for centuries. That's why it's so easy for them to do what they're doing now. It's basically one big psyop, and every war that they put forward, they just learn more and more about us. So social engineering and analysis and automation of a society requires the correlation of great amounts of constantly changing economic information, data. So a high-speed computerized data processing system was necessary, which could race ahead of society and predict when society would arrive for capitulation. So this just goes in here to talk about your first computers, um, the breakthrough of linear programming by the mathematician George B. Dantzig. Then it talks about the transistor, um, making a smaller transistor to reduce space and power requirements. And then it tells you, so with these three inventions that they had going, radio and linear programming and computers, this transistor, the Rockefeller Foundation got in on the ground floor by making a 4-year grant to Harvard College. Now, one of the questions I've always wondered is like, why do these people pretend that they care so much, right? Like, seriously, can't you just go off on your yacht or something? No, you got to be in charge of everything, right? So then they also had the Air Force join in. All right, we'll go down here some more. Energy. Energy is recognized as the key to all activity on Earth. So basically, they're using mathematics as the bookkeeping system, and mathematics is the primary energy science. I think I've said this before, where the currency, right, money is the representation of the work, or the amount of work you did, right? So that is how they're actually tracking energy in the economy. All science is merely a means to an end. The means is knowledge. The end is control. And who will be the beneficiary? And then it says here in 1954, this was the primary concern. Although the so-called moral issues were raised in view of the law of natural selection, it was agreed that a nation or world of people who will not use their intelligence are no better than animals who do not have intelligence. Such people are beasts of burden and stakes on the table by choice and consent. Consequently, in the interest of future world order, peace, and tranquility, it was decided to privately wage a quiet war against the American public with an ultimate objective of permanently shifting the natural and social wealth of the undisciplined and irresponsible into the many. Well, I said that wrong. Shifting the natural and social energy wealth of the undisciplined and irresponsible into the hands of the self-disciplined, responsible, and worthy few. So these people think that we're not worthy of controlling ourselves, so that they need to be in control. So these weapons they're using against us are quiet weapons. Right now, you're currently in the middle of a war, and you just not realize it. I think those of us that are awake do. So what they wanted to do is come about with a predictable economy. And they say here, in order to achieve a totally predictable economy, the low class elements of society must be brought under total control, i.e. must be housebroken, trained, and assigned a yoke and long-term social duties from a very early age before they have an opportunity to question the propriety of the matter. In order to achieve such conformity, the lower class family unit must be disintegrated by a process of increasing preoccupation of the parents and the establishment of government-operated daycare centers for the occupationally orphaned children. The quality of education given to the lower class must be of the poorest sort, so that the mote of ignorance isolating the inferior class from the superior class is and remains incomprehensible to the inferior class. With such an initial handicap, even bright lower class individuals have little, if any, hope of extricating themselves from their assigned lot in life. This form of slavery is essential to maintain some measure of social order, peace, and tranquility for the ruling upper class. So these silent weapons, this is explaining here, it shoots in situations instead of bullets, propelled by data processing instead of chemical reaction, explosion, originating from bits of data instead of grains of gunpowder, from a computer instead of a gun, operated by a computer programmer instead of a marksman. Now, this is interesting here, right? By situation. So, what was the thing I was reading the other day? Boom. His annual report here, right? Where they tell you, this is from the Rockefeller Foundation, 2010. And what they were saying in this report, they actually called the decade of 2010 to 2020 the decade of doom. But they have these, let me see if they have the scenarios in here. So they give you, oh, I can't search this one. Let's see. This tells you all of these different outbreaks they're thinking about. See, symptoms unknown. So what they do is they put forth a scenario, right? And this document is in 2010, much after this one here. So, you know, we could say, like, some people may argue that this document isn't real, kind of like, what is it, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. I don't know if you've read that. But it doesn't really matter if it's real or not, if it's already happening, right? Say this is actually just something that's just made up. Well, it's actually happening. So here we go. Anyway, so I just showed you kind of what they do. They war game all of these situations and then they put it out, right? They will float it into the news. There's always a new virus. There's always a new murder bee or hornet or whatever. I mean, there's always something to be scared of. There's an explosion. There's a terrorist. There's this and there's that. And what they do is they're saying here, it makes no obvious explosive noises, causes no obvious physical or mental injuries, and does not interfere with anyone's daily social life. Yet it makes an unmistakable noise, causes unmistakable physical and mental damage, and unmistakably interferes with the daily social life, i.e., unmistakable to a trained observer, one who knows what to look for. The public cannot comprehend this weapon and therefore cannot believe that they are being attacked and subdued by a weapon. The public might instinctively feel that something is wrong and that it is because of the technical nature of the silent weapon. They cannot express their feelings in a rational way or handle the problem with intelligence. Therefore, they do not know how to cry for help and do not know how to associate with others to defend themselves against it. It's exactly what they're up to now, right? Masks, telling everyone to stay away from everyone else. When a silent weapon is applied gradually, the public adjusts and adapts to its presence and learns to tolerate its encroachment on their lives until the pressure, psychological via economic, becomes too great and they crack up. Therefore, the silent weapon is a type of biological warfare. It attacks the vitality, options, and mobility of the individuals of a society by knowing, understanding, manipulating, and attacking their sources of natural and social energy and their physical, mental, and emotional strengths and weaknesses. And this is a famous quote that many people know. Give me control over nations' currency, and I care not who makes its laws. Mr. Red Shield himself. So then here it goes into how they're using the concept of energy, right? Basically the laws of physics to apply to the economy. And this is, they will talk about this. I'm not going to go through all of this with you guys. I'm going to post this document so you can read it if you want to. So you have your potential energy phenomenon, kinetic energy, right? And the energy dissipation. So this is how they put it with the economy. So in economics, these three energy concepts are associated with one, economic capacitance, which is your capital in buildings and durables, your economic conductance, which is your goods, so it's your production flow coefficients, and your economic inductance, which is the services, the influence of the population of industry on the output. All the mathematical theory developed in the study of one energy system, like mechanics or electronics, can be immediately applied to study of any other energy system, i.e. economics. So that is how they're controlling everything. And then, like Mr. Rothschild said before, principle is when you assume the appearance of power, people soon give it to you. And if you look at any of these documents, like the one I was just talking about, this annual report here, the World Bank is all over it. They're all over it. All over it. So people seems to think that that it's a conspiracy. But if it's a conspiracy, why do they have documents? They just make up these documents to trick us. I mean, they really put in so much effort. Mr. Rothschild loaned his promissory notes to individuals and governments. These created overconfidence, right? Because he didn't even have to have gold. He just had these promissory notes. This is what they're up to, right? None of these banks, that was my alarm. None of these banks actually are leveraging anything, right? They're not actually, when you come in for a loan, they don't say, oh, well, I'm going to put this property up over here to give this person 500 million or 500 grand or whatever for a loan. It's all make believe. And basically this collection of debts, it comes about with war. And they control both sides of the war because they determine who gets the currency. Governments give him control of its economy, they get his support. It's the same thing like you hear about with Abraham Lincoln when he wanted to finance the Civil War. He went to the bankers and they said no, so he started printing greenbacks, and that's why a lot of people think that he was actually shot. All right, so I'm just going to skim through some of this here. War is therefore the balancing of the system by killing the true creditors and falling back on whatever is left of the resources of nature and regeneration of those resources. You can use the currency to rearrange the economic structure to your own advantage. Anyways, this is a very, very interesting document. Very eye-opening. Airframe shock testing. They monitor the reaction of the public. So they've been studying us. Eventually, every individual element of the structure comes under computer control through a knowledge of personal preferences. Such knowledge guaranteed by computer association of consumer preferences, Universal Product Code, UPC, zebra-striped pricing codes on packages, with identified consumer, identified via association with the use of a credit card, and later a permanent tattooed body number visible under ambient illumination. That's what we're seeing right now, right? You've got this push to vaccinate everyone, and the vaccine is coming. So to them, economics is only a social extension of the natural energy system. In order to achieve sovereignty over the public, the elites must achieve this one end, that the public will not make either the logical or mathematical connection between economics and the other energy sciences or learn to apply such knowledge. And that's the sad part too. Like a lot of us go to college and we learn about their systems. They have business modeling, and people like me were in chemistry and all of these different scientific classes, but you never learn to think independently. And that's because they subvert education, they control the media, they make it to where you're always distracted with matters of no real importance. And here how they set out the economic model. Like they said before, it was an extension of World War II operations research, the science of controlling an economy. First, the American economy, and then the world, right? If you look now, they're trying to topple America and get us to accept this vaccine and all of these new rules, because if we'll do it, everyone else will. So here, this gets a little more mathematical. They talk about the industrial diagrams coming out here. And if you've ever done any electrical engineering, and they're basically writing it as a circuit, and it shows the flow of industry number 1 into industry K here, and then the outflow here. And they're just modeling the energy that's in the economy as if it were electricity, as if it were electrons. Same thing with this here. So you can have different nodes, and it gets more complicated, obviously, different arrows, because you have output and input from different parts here, industry networks. So if you had these industries here linked together, 1, 2, and 3, it's kind of showing you how they feed each other and basically live off of each other. Look, they even have their mathematical models. You have your classes here, class 1 capital, class 2 goods, class 3 is services. And these industries exist at 3 levels in class 1, nature, government, banking. Class 2 industries exist as producers of tangible or consumer dissipated products. And class 3, the industries are those which have service rather than a tangible product. So that's households and governments. And if you actually look, I was studying a few years ago, I think it was like 2010. Most people are actually somehow directly or indirectly working for the government these days. There aren't that many people actually producing a tangible product. So the whole economic system is described by them in 3 things: capital, goods, and services. And we just talk more inductance here. I mean, they've just studied us to the hilt. And then they have a translation here. So like your charge, coulombs, right? Which would be dollars. Your flow or current, amperes, coulombs per second. That's talking about electricity, but then dollars of flow per year here in terms of the economy. Coulombs per volt and the capacitance, dollars of production inventory over stocks per dollar demand. So they've modeled everything. And that's how they're so successful across the board. They're so successful in pretty much everything they do because they've studied us so much, and they use the same mythology over and over again. Time flow relationships and self-destructive oscillations. Foresight flow is the result of the property of living entities to cause energy, i.e. food, to be stored for a period of low energy, i.e. winter season. They've been telling us winter's coming for a long time, haven't they? Game of Thrones reference. Present flow is like right now, or hand to mouth, which is unfortunately how most people lived even prior to the economic demolition that we're seeing. Hindsight flow is habit or inertia. Amazing. It's been a long time since I had economics class. This little PDF is a pretty good reminder. This is an interesting paragraph I remember reading. The social welfare program is nothing more than an open-ended credit balance system which creates a false capital industry to give non-productive people a roof over their heads and food in their stomachs. This can be useful, however, because the recipients become state property in return for the gift, a standing army for the elite. For he who pays the piper picks the tune. Those who get hooked on the economic drug must go to the elite for a fix. In this, the method of introducing large amounts of stabilizing capacitance is by borrowing on the future credit of the world. This is a fourth law of motion onset and consists of performing an action and leaving the system before the reflected reaction returns to the point of action, a delayed reaction. Same thing is achieved by a government printing money beyond the limit of the gross national product, an economic process called inflation. This puts a large quantity of money into the hands of the public and maintains a balance against their greed, creates false self-confidence in them, and for a while stays the wolf from the door. And they know, right here, they say the general public, most of the general public will not exercise restraint. There are only two alternatives to reduce the economic inductance of the system. Let the population bludgeon each other to death in war, which will only result in a total destruction of the living earth, or take control of the world by the use of economic silent weapons in the form of quiet warfare to reduce the economic inductance of the world to a safe level by the process of benevolent slavery and genocide. Oh, Lord. The masses do not care about an economic science to learn why they have not been able to avoid war despite religious morality, and their religious or self-gratifying refusal to deal with earthly problems renders the solution of the earthly problem unreachable to them. Basically, the elites think they're doing this to us for our own good. They think that we're barbarians, proliferating barbarians, a blight upon the face of the earth. Don't you hear it over and over again? How we're destroying the earth and the planet. I mean, but what I think is really more interesting is, the elites themselves are the ones who, for instance, made everything into plastic. When I was a kid, we had glass and the Cokes were in glass and you turned it back in and they boiled it and then they put a new top on it and they gave it back to you and you had a glass bottle every time and things tasted better and you weren't being poisoned. But we get blamed for that too, right? We get blamed for them not wanting to dispose of fluoride properly, so they sell it to us and put us in our drinking water, because fluoride is the byproduct of the aluminum industry. Same thing with cottonseed, right? Cottonseed and Crisco. They didn't want to have to dispose of the pounds and tons of cotton seeds that come from making clothes. So what they did is they made up a way to hydrogenate that oil, basically extract it from the seeds and sell it to us and tell us it was healthier for us than lard or anything else that's natural like butter. And you see how many millions of people have died from this one lie alone. Sorry, I went off on a little tangent there. Industry equivalent circuits. It's really interesting. I've never seen the economy modeled this way. And I took a lot of economics. All right, I'm not going to bore you guys to death by going into this and acting like I'm your school teacher. Hopefully, this isn't too bad. I wanted to put this forth because and show you guys what's going on in a very they like I said, they've been studying us. It's a very scientific thing. The household industry. I know, they try to have always been trying to target commercials towards housewives because they're the ones purchasing for the house. So one of the problems they had, the theoretical economist has, is that consumer preferences of any household is not easily predictable, and the technical coefficients of any one household tend to be nonlinear, very complex, and a variable function of income, prices, etc. I think one of the ways, I haven't read this part of it, but I imagine that they control, or at least prior to a lot of this, they control it by what you purchase by commercials, and advertising. So they're using this UPC code with credit card purchases as an individual household identifier. Now, this is in 1954, so they didn't really they didn't have this going on, but now this is they've been doing this, I don't know, probably since the late 90s, I would say. So it took them 50 years to get that part going, didn't it? And they group these households as um, they track you instead of doing it individually. They make them into a group, and the mass behavior is used instead of individual behavior to discover useful estimates. Oh, so they're estimating like I do. Shock testing. So they're using this uh, like you would test an aircraft frame. Economic engineers achieve the same result, right, that you have when you test an airplane by studying the behavior of the economy and consumer public by carefully selecting a staple commodity such as beef, coffee, gasoline, or sugar, and then causing a sudden change or shock in its price or availability, and thus kicking everybody's budget and buying habits out of shape. Boy, if you didn't think we were getting fucked with before. They also shock test labor. They have labor strikes. I always wondered why things like labor unions never seem to do that much for workers. Everything that they set up supposedly to help us ends up hurting us in the end. And here's the point: when the subject citizens are rendered unable to control their financial affairs, they of course become totally enslaved, a choice of cheap labor. By shock testing, it is found that there is a direct relationship between the availability of money flowing in an economy and the real psychological outlook of people dependent upon that availability. And then they just go into the theory of it and how you would do it. An example of shock testing: petroleum is described by a linear function of the quantities BG&M. How many times have they done this to us? Huh? Told us the price of oil is up or down. They do the same thing, beef, and they affect each other, obviously, because when the price of oil goes up, then the price of everything else goes up too. Anything that depends upon oil to be delivered. They even have a they even have a equation to model the docile subnation that tends to withdraw under economic pressure. So these economic amplifiers, instead of like an amp that you would use in terms of sound, they use advertising. Interesting. I don't know if any of you guys have watched that show, Mad Men. It kind of goes into advertising in an interesting way. I mean, obviously, it's showing a lot of bad behavior, but I mean, in Manhattan, there's a lot of bad behavior. So they really do study you, everything, who, what, where, when, how, why, sources of information, how you would get it, standard of living, social contracts. See this right here, this personal paper trail. Basically, I think they're going to be giving us all a UPC. That's probably what's going to happen with this vaccine. Now remember, this is in 1954, so it's a long time ago. The principle of a ploy, so a government source when you're considering advertising. Principle of this ploy, the citizen will almost always make the collection of information easy if he can operate on the free sandwich principle of eat now and pay later. You know us well, don't they? They'll surveil your mail, habit patterns, programming here. Basically anything you're up to. Hobbies, crime records, whether you've been to the hospital, psychiatric records. Jeez. Methods of coping, right? Notice how alcohol stores were considered essential. Not seeing your doctor, like I haven't been able to see my neurology pain doctor since January. That's not considered essential, but alcohol was, right? And McDonald's. They just been studying us this whole time. So this short list of outputs to create controlled situations, manipulation of the economy and hence society, control by control of compensation and income. They allocate the opportunity, they destroy the opportunities, control the economic environment, the availability of raw materials, they control the capital, control the bank rates, they control the inflation of the currency, they control the possession of property, and they control the industrial capacity, right? All of these rules and laws they pass constantly. They control the manufacturing, availability of goods, price of the goods of these commodities. I always thought it should be illegal to speculate on foodstuffs. The reason it's not because they want to control us. Control the personal data files, incorruptible by the party that's slandered. Disengage attention from real issue, engage emotion, create disorder, chaos, and insanity. Controls design of more probing tax forms. Prey on your weakness. Control your health options. Control sociological factors. Profiling. You think profiling is just for forensics, right? Like you watch on the TV. Leeches wealth and substance. Table of strategies. Do this. Keep the public ignorant to get this. Less public organization, which is true, right? Like you can't get hardly any people to get together that you know to even say, hey, we're not going to wear this mask or we're not going to take this vaccine. Think about it. How many people in your real life can you talk to and have them agree with you? Very few. Create preoccupation. Yep. Lower your defense, right? If you're not paying attention to what's going on because you're too busy focused on the Kardashians or something like that, you're going to be not paying attention. Attack the family unit. Big one, right? Control the education of the young. Without a father in the family, without a good family unit, you end up with a lot of problems. You end up with kids that get raped, kids that end up on drugs, stressed out mothers who become abusive. I mean, it's really bad. Give less cash and more credit and doles so that you have what? More self-indulgence and more data, right? So the more they give us a lot of rope to hang ourselves with, basically. Attack on the privacy of the church, like they're doing now. You can't even sing in church. So you destroy the faith. You destroy the faith in religion. So then who do they go to? Government. Social conformity. Minimize tax protest so that they get the maximum economic data and minimum enforcement problems. Collapse of the currency. Destroy the faith of the American people in each other. That's what masks and social distancing is about. Diversion is the primary strategy. Experience has proven that the simplest method of securing a silent weapon and gaining control of the public is to keep the public undisciplined and ignorant of the base system principles on hand, while keeping them confused, disorganized, and distracted with matters of no real importance on the other hand. This is achieved by disengaging their minds, sabotaging their mental activities, providing a low-quality program of public education in mathematics, logic, systems design, and economics, and discouraging technical creativity. Engaging their emotions, increasing their self-indulgence and their indulgence in emotional and physical activities by unrelenting emotional affrontations and attacks, mental and emotional rape by way of constant barrage of sex, violence, and wars in the media, especially the TV and the newspapers. Giving them what they desire in excess, junk food for thought, and depriving them of what they really need. Rewriting history and law and subjecting the public to deviant creation, thus being able to shift their thinking from personal needs to highly fabricated outside priorities. Summary: keep the public attention diverted away from real social issues and captivated by matters of no real importance. Keep the young ignorant. And keep public entertainment below a sixth grade level. Unless, the entertainment always has something to do sexually, which is way above a sixth grade level, right? And work. Keep the public busy, busy, busy with no time to think, back on the farm with the other animals. A silent weapon operates upon data obtained by a docile public by legal, but not always lawful force. There's a difference between legal and lawful. The IRS gives them a lot of their info. Consent coefficients. Psychological basis. When the government is able to collect tax and seize private property without just compensation, it is an indication that the public is ripe for surrender and is consenting to enslavement and legal encroachment. A good and easily quantified indicator of harvest time is the number of public citizens who pay income tax despite an obvious lack of reciprocal or honest service from the government. Yeah, they're all about manufacturing consent. Consent in quotations. Interesting. The artificial womb. Sorry about that, y'all. I had a phone call. All right, so artificial womb. Interesting. The objective of these artificial wombs is to create a stable environment for both stable and unstable activity, to provide a shelter for the evolutionary processes of growth and maturity, i.e., survival, to provide security and freedom, and to provide defensive protection for offensive activity. Interesting. So, this is how they're trying to protect themselves against us figuring it out. Nation of dependency. The primary reason why the individual citizens of a country create a political structure is is a subconscious wish or desire to perpetuate their own dependency relationship of childhood. Simply put, they want a human god to eliminate all risk from their life, pat them on the head, kiss their bruises, put a chicken on every dinner table, clothe their bodies, tuck them into bed at night, and tell them that everything will be all right when they wake up in the morning. This public demand is incredible, so the human god, the politician, meets incredibility with incredibility by promising the world and delivering nothing. So who is the bigger liar, the public or the godfather? Wow, that's true. That's why I keep saying, like, why do you believe that someone in a castle or in a mansion cares about you, right? Like, I ask a lot of people, why do you believe the government loves you? Like, why? I mean, people in their own families can't even get along, let alone this, you know, the government caring for you. Most people want to be able to subdue and or kill other human beings, which disturb their daily lives, but they do not want to have to cope with the moral and religious issues which such an overt act on their part might raise. Therefore, they assign the dirty work to others, including their own children, so as to keep the blood off of their hands. They rave about the humane treatment of animals and then sit down to a delicious hamburger from the whitewashed slaughterhouse down the street and out of sight. Even more hypocritical, they pay taxes to finance a professional association of hitmen, collectively called politicians, and then complain about corruption in government. In summary, people hire politicians so that they can obtain security without managing it, obtain action without thinking about it, inflict theft, injury, and death upon others without having to contemplate either life or death, avoid responsibility for their own intentions, obtain the benefits of reality and science without exerting themselves in the discipline of facing or learning any of these things. They give the politicians the power to create and manage the war machine. Interesting. I don't know that this is actually, I don't know, maybe this is an elite quote unquote document. If it's not, sure is a good description of what they've done, isn't it? Goes through the draft. All right, y'all. So this is about it for me. I think I've talked way too long today. But if you have the time to go over this, it's pretty interesting. Thank you for listening. Take care. I don't know how to turn this off.